Mastering the discussion, from findings to contribution. In this comprehensive examination of the discussion section, we embark upon what represents the most intellectually demanding and strategically critical component of empirical research writing. The discussion section serves as the primary venue where raw empirical findings are transformed into meaningful scholarly contributions that advance both theoretical understanding and practical knowledge within your field. This transformation is neither automatic nor trivial. It requires sophisticated analytical thinking, deep theoretical grounding, and masterful communication skills that distinguish exceptional scholars from competent researchers. The discussion section represents the intersection of empirical rigor and theoretical innovation, where your role shifts from data analyst to knowledge creator. Here, you must demonstrate not only what your research has discovered, but why these discoveries matter for the broader scholarly conversation and how they should influence future thinking and practice. As Gillick-Conage and Tepper, 2012, articulate in their editorial, the discussion functions as both an ending to your current investigation and a new beginning for future scholarly inquiry. This paradoxical nature requires you to simultaneously provide closure to your research questions while opening new avenues for theoretical development and empirical investigation. Throughout this lecture, we will systematically deconstruct the components of exemplary discussion sections, drawing upon foundational frameworks from leading management scholars. We will examine the AMJ Management Research Canvas developed by Dorobantu et al. 2024 as a tool for ensuring coherence and completeness in your research narrative. We will analyze the specific guidance provided by Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, for avoiding the common pitfalls that lead to desk rejections. Most importantly, we will develop your capacity to craft discussion sections that not only meet the technical requirements of scholarly publication, but that genuinely advance knowledge in ways that influence how scholars and practitioners think about important organizational phenomena. The stakes of mastering this skill cannot be overstated. In an academic environment where the average published article receives fewer than 10 citations, the quality of your discussion section often determines whether your research contributes to ongoing scholarly conversations or disappears into the vast repository of unread literature. The frameworks and principles we explore today will provide you with the intellectual tools necessary to ensure that your research makes a lasting impact on your field. Learning objectives. The learning objectives for this session represent a fundamental transformation in how you approach the discussion section, moving from a perfunctory summary of findings to a sophisticated synthesis that advances scholarly knowledge. These objectives are designed to develop multiple layers of competency, from basic technical skills to advanced theoretical reasoning capabilities, that will distinguish your work in the competitive landscape of academic publishing. First, you will master the deconstruction of discussion sections by developing a comprehensive understanding of their essential components and their interconnected functions. This involves learning to interpret empirical findings in ways that go beyond simple description to meaningful explanation, contextualizing your research within the broader theoretical and empirical landscape of your field, and articulating both theoretical and practical implications with precision and impact. You will learn to recognize the difference between merely reporting what you found and explaining what your findings mean for how we understand organizational phenomena. This skill requires developing the ability to translate statistical results into theoretical insights that advance scholarly understanding. Second, you will apply the hourglass model to understand how the discussion section functions as the broadening base of your research narrative. This architectural understanding will help you strategically expand from the narrow focus of your specific findings to their broader implications for theory, practice, and future research. You will learn to manage this transition skillfully, ensuring that your discussion maintains logical coherence while demonstrating the wider significance of your work. The hourglass model provides a visual framework for understanding how effective academic writing moves from general to specific and back to general, with the discussion serving as the critical broadening phase. Third, you will develop advanced synthesis and critique capabilities that enable you to weave your findings into the existing literature in ways that advance theoretical understanding. This involves learning to identify patterns across studies, resolve apparent contradictions through theoretical analysis, and position your research as addressing important gaps or challenges in current knowledge. You will master the art of scholarly conversation, learning to engage with previous research in ways that are both respectful and critical, demonstrating how your findings contribute to ongoing theoretical debates. Fourth, you will learn to articulate contribution with clarity and conviction, drawing upon frameworks like the AMJ Management Research Canvas to ensure that your theoretical and practical contributions are clearly specified and well supported. This involves developing the ability to distinguish between different types of contributions, theoretical, methodological, empirical, and practical, and to present each type with appropriate evidence and argumentation. You will learn to move beyond vague statements about the importance of your research to specific claims about how your findings advance understanding and inform practice. Finally, you will master the strategic framing of limitations and future research directions, learning to transform potential weaknesses into opportunities for theoretical advancement and empirical investigation. This skill is crucial for demonstrating scholarly maturity and for positioning yourself as a thoughtful contributor to ongoing research conversations. You will learn to acknowledge constraints on your research while maintaining confidence in your contributions and providing specific guidance for future scholars who wish to build upon your work. Why the discussion section matters: the reality of academic impact. The discussion section occupies a unique and critical position in determining the ultimate impact and influence of your research. Understanding why this section matters requires confronting some sobering realities about academic publishing and scholarly influence that will fundamentally shape how you approach your research communication. These realities underscore the importance of developing sophisticated discussion writing skills that can distinguish your work in an increasingly competitive academic environment. Consider the stark reality that confronts every scholar. The vast majority of published research articles receive minimal attention from the scholarly community. Recent bibliometric analysis revealed that approximately 50% of published articles are never cited by other scholars, and the median number of citations for published articles across most fields remains below 5. This is not necessarily because the research is methodologically flawed or the findings are unimportant. Rather, it often reflects the author's failure to communicate effectively why their research matters and how it should influence future thinking and practice. The discussion section serves as the primary mechanism for transforming empirical findings into scholarly influence. Consider two hypothetical studies examining the relationship between transformational leadership and employee innovation. Both studies employ identical methodologies, analyze comparable datasets, and generate statistically significant findings. The first study concludes its discussion with a brief summary of results, a perfunctory acknowledgement of limitations, and a generic call for future research. The second study uses its discussion to develop a nuanced theoretical argument about the boundary conditions under which transformational leadership enhances innovation, connects these findings to broader theories of organizational change and employee motivation, and proposes a specific research agenda that addresses the most pressing unanswered questions in the field. The first study might be published in a respectable journal and receive modest attention from specialists in leadership research. The second study, however, is likely to be published in a top-tier journal, generate significant citations, and influence how scholars and practitioners think about leadership and innovation. The difference lies not in the quality of the empirical work, but in the sophistication and impact of the discussion section. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, emphasized that effective academic writing must tell a compelling story that is both believable and memorable. The discussion section is where the story reaches its climax and resolution, where the narrative threads established in your introduction and literature review are woven together into a coherent and impactful conclusion. A well-crafted discussion section does more than report findings. It shapes how readers think about the phenomena you have studied and influences the direction of future research in your field. The implications for your career as a scholar practitioner are profound. In an increasingly competitive academic environment, your ability to craft discussion sections that generate citations, influence policy, and shape practice will largely determine your professional success and the lasting impact of your scholarly contributions. The discussion section is where you establish your voice as a scholar and demonstrate your capacity to contribute meaningfully to the advancement of knowledge in your field. The architecture of academic storytelling. Effective academic writing follows sophisticated narrative principles that reflect fundamental aspects of human cognition and communication. Understanding these principles is essential for crafting discussion sections that are not only informative, but also persuasive and memorable. Two complementary frameworks provide the architectural foundation for exceptional scholarly communication: the hourglass model and Freytag's pyramid. The hourglass model represents the structural flow of information through a research article, describing how the scope of discussion moves from broad to narrow and back to broad again. At the top of the hourglass, your introduction begins with a wide-angle view of your research domain, establishing the broader context and significance of your investigation. As you progress through your literature review and theory development, the focus gradually narrows to address the specific theoretical puzzle that motivates your research. The narrow waist of the hourglass represents your research questions, methodology, and results, the most focused and specific components of your study. The discussion section marks the point where the hourglass begins to expand again, as you systematically broaden the implications of your specific findings. This expansion is not random or uncontrolled. It follows a logical progression that connects your particular discoveries to increasingly general theoretical and practical insights. You begin by interpreting your specific findings, then contextualize them within the existing literature, articulate their theoretical and practical implications, and finally propose directions for future research that extend beyond the boundaries of your current investigation. Freytag's pyramid, originally developed to analyze dramatic literature, provides a complementary framework for understanding the narrative arc of empirical research. In this framework, your introduction and literature review constitute the exposition, where you introduce the key concepts, establish the theoretical context, and present the fundamental tensions or puzzles that drive your investigation. Your theory development and hypothesis formulation represent the rising action, where you build intellectual tension by demonstrating how previous research has grappled with your focal puzzle and where current understanding falls short. Your methodology and results sections serve as the climax, the moment of empirical revelation where theoretical predictions encounter empirical reality. This is the point of maximum tension and interest, where readers discover what your data actually reveal about the phenomena under investigation. The discussion section functions as the falling action, where you work through the implications of your empirical discoveries and demonstrate how they resolve the theoretical tensions you established earlier. Your conclusion serves as the denouement, where you establish a new intellectual equilibrium and demonstrate how the field should think differently as a result of your contribution. These narrative frameworks are not merely aesthetic considerations. They reflect fundamental aspects of how human cognition processes complex information. By aligning your writing with these cognitive patterns, you make your research more accessible, memorable, and persuasive. Readers can follow your reasoning more easily, understand the significance of your contributions more clearly, and integrate your findings into their own thinking more effectively. The discussion section, as the falling action and resolution of your research narrative, plays a crucial role in ensuring that your story has lasting impact on your scholarly audience. The core functions of the discussion section: a systematic framework. The discussion section serves multiple interconnected functions that collectively transform empirical findings into scholarly contributions. Understanding these functions and their relationships is essential for crafting discussion sections that meet the highest standards of scholarly excellence. Drawing upon insights from our foundational articles, we can identify 4 primary functions that must be skillfully integrated: interpretation, contextualization, implication, and extension. The interpretation function involves translating your empirical findings from the technical language of statistical analysis into meaningful theoretical insights. This is not simply a matter of restating your results in different words, a practice that Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2012, identify as rehashing. Rather, interpretation requires you to explain what your findings mean for understanding the phenomena you have studied. You must address each of your research questions and hypotheses systematically, explaining not only whether your predictions were supported, but what the pattern of support or non-support reveals about the underlying theoretical mechanisms. Effective interpretation transforms statistical relationships into theoretical insights that advance scholarly understanding. The contextualization function requires you to position your findings within the broader landscape of existing knowledge. This involves comparing and contrasting your results with those of previous studies, identifying areas of convergence and divergence, and explaining the theoretical significance of these patterns. Effective contextualization goes beyond simple citation of related work. It requires sophisticated synthesis that demonstrates how your findings advance, challenge, or refine existing theoretical understanding. This function is crucial for demonstrating your mastery of the scholarly conversation and for positioning your research as a meaningful contribution to ongoing theoretical debates. The implication function involves articulating the broader significance of your research for both theoretical development and practical application. Theoretical implications address how your findings should influence future theorizing about your focal phenomena, while practical implications address how your research should inform the decisions and actions of practitioners, managers, policymakers, or other stakeholders. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, developed by Dorobantu et al., 2024, provides a structured approach to thinking about contributions, emphasizing the importance of clearly articulating how your empirical findings change our understanding of the theoretical puzzle that motivated your research. The extension function involves acknowledging the limitations of your current investigation, while proposing specific directions for future research that can address these limitations and build upon your contributions. This function is crucial for demonstrating scholarly maturity and for positioning your research as part of an ongoing conversation, rather than a definitive final word. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, emphasize that limitations should be framed strategically rather than apologetically, transforming potential weaknesses into opportunities for future theoretical and empirical advancement. These functions are not independent or sequential. They are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Effective discussion sections weave these functions together in ways that create coherent and compelling narratives about the significance and implications of empirical research. The AMJ Management Research Canvas provides a useful framework for ensuring that all functions are adequately addressed and properly integrated within your overall research narrative. Interpretation of results, from data to meaning. The interpretation of results represents the foundational component of any effective discussion section, serving as the bridge between empirical findings and theoretical insights. This process requires sophisticated analytical thinking that goes far beyond simple description of statistical outcomes to meaningful explanation of what those outcomes reveal about the phenomena under investigation. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2012, emphasize that this is where many authors fall into the trap of rehashing, simply restating their results without providing meaningful theoretical interpretation. Effective interpretation begins with a systematic examination of each research question and hypothesis, but it extends well beyond mechanical reporting of support or non-support. You must explain what the pattern of findings reveals about the underlying theoretical mechanisms that govern the relationships you have studied. For instance, if you hypothesize that transformational leadership would positively influence employee creativity, and your analysis reveals strong support for this relationship, your interpretation should address not only the fact of this relationship, but what it suggests about the psychological and social processes through which transformational leaders influence creative behavior. Consider a more complex example involving interaction effects. Suppose your research examines how the relationship between team diversity and performance is moderated by leadership style. Your results might reveal that diversity enhances performance under transformational leadership, but diminishes performance under transactional leadership. The interpretation of these findings requires you to explain the theoretical mechanisms that account for this pattern. You might argue that transformational leaders create psychological safety that allows diverse team members to contribute their unique perspectives, while transactional leaders focus on standardized processes that prevent diverse teams from leveraging their varied expertise. The interpretation process also requires you to address unexpected findings or non-significant results in theoretically meaningful ways. Non-significant results are not failures to be dismissed. They are empirical information that can provide important insights about the boundary conditions of theoretical relationships or the need for theoretical refinement. If your hypothesis about the positive relationship between diversity and performance receives no support, you should explore possible theoretical explanations. Perhaps the relationship is more complex than originally theorized, requiring consideration of additional moderating variables. Perhaps your theoretical framework needs to be refined to account for different types of diversity or different performance outcomes. Comparison with previous studies, engaging the scholarly conversation. The comparison with previous studies represents one of the most intellectually demanding aspects of the discussion section, requiring you to position your findings within the broader landscape of existing knowledge while demonstrating how your research advances theoretical understanding. Effective comparison begins with identifying the most relevant previous studies that have examined similar phenomena, relationships, or theoretical questions. However, relevance is not determined solely by topical similarity. It also depends on theoretical significance, methodological rigor, and the potential for meaningful comparison. You should prioritize studies that provide the strongest theoretical foundations for your research, employ methodologies that allow for meaningful comparison with your approach, and generate findings that can inform interpretation of your results. The comparison process requires you to identify and explain patterns of convergence and divergence between your findings and those of previous research. When your findings align with previous studies, this convergence provides important validation for both your results and the underlying theoretical framework. However, you should not simply note this alignment. You should explain what this pattern of convergence suggests about the robustness and generalizability of the theoretical relationships you have studied. When your findings diverge from previous research, this divergence represents an opportunity for theoretical advancement rather than a problem to be explained away. Divergent findings often reveal important boundary conditions, moderating variables, or theoretical mechanisms that have not been adequately considered in previous research. Your task is to provide theoretically grounded explanations for these differences that advance understanding of the phenomena under investigation. The comparison process also requires you to address methodological differences that might account for variations in findings across studies. Differences in sample characteristics, measurement approaches, analytical techniques, or research contexts can all influence results in theoretically meaningful ways. By acknowledging and explaining these differences, you demonstrate methodological sophistication and provide valuable insights for future research, design, and interpretation. The goal of this comparison is not simply to catalog similarities and differences, but to use these patterns to advance theoretical understanding. Each comparison should contribute to building a more nuanced and complete understanding of the phenomena you have studied, positioning your research as a meaningful contribution to the ongoing scholarly conversation. Theoretical framework integration, connecting findings to theory. The integration of your findings with your theoretical framework represents a critical component of the discussion section that demonstrates the theoretical significance of your research and its contribution to scholarly knowledge. This process requires you to systematically connect your empirical discoveries back to the theoretical foundations that guided your investigation, while also considering how your findings should influence future theoretical development. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, emphasize the importance of distinguishing between theory development and literature review, noting that effective theoretical integration requires precise argumentation rather than broad conceptual discussions. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, developed by Dorobantu et al. 2024, provides valuable guidance for this integration process by emphasizing the importance of maintaining coherence between your theoretical constructs and relationships, your empirical findings, and your contributions. The Canvas encourages you to consider how your findings change, understanding of the theoretical puzzle that motivated your research, ensuring that your theoretical integration addresses the core questions that drive scholarly inquiry in your field. Effective theoretical integration begins with a clear restatement of the theoretical framework that guided your research, followed by a systematic examination of how your findings relate to the key theoretical propositions, mechanisms, and boundary conditions specified in that framework. You must address whether your findings provide support for the theoretical relationships you predicted. But more importantly, you must explain what your findings reveal about the underlying theoretical mechanisms that govern these relationships. Consider a study examining the relationship between organizational culture and employee performance, grounded in social cognitive theory. Your theoretical framework might propose that organizational culture influences performance through its effects on employee self-efficacy, goal orientation, and social learning processes. Your empirical findings might reveal strong support for the culture-performance relationship, but the theoretical integration requires you to explain how these findings illuminate the specific mechanisms proposed by social cognitive theory. The integration process also requires you to consider how your findings should influence future theoretical development. Do your results suggest that existing theories need to be refined, extended, or fundamentally reconsidered? Do they reveal new theoretical mechanisms or boundary conditions that have not been adequately addressed in previous theorizing? Do they suggest new theoretical questions that should guide future research? The theoretical integration process also requires you to acknowledge limitations in your theoretical framework and to propose refinements or extensions that could address these limitations. This demonstrates theoretical sophistication and positions your research as contributing to ongoing theoretical development rather than simply testing existing propositions. Implications for research and practice. The implications section represents what Gillick and Tepper, 2012, describe as the new beginning aspect of the discussion, where you articulate how your findings should influence future theoretical development and practical application. This section is crucial for demonstrating the broader significance of your research and for positioning your work as a meaningful contribution to both scholarly knowledge and practical understanding. The implications you develop here will largely determine whether your research influences future thinking and practice or remains an isolated empirical observation. Theoretical implications address how your findings should influence future theorizing about the phenomena you have studied. Effective theoretical implications go beyond simple statements about the need for more research. They provide specific guidance about how theoretical frameworks should be refined, extended, or reconceptualized based on your empirical discoveries. You should identify the most important theoretical insights that emerge from your research and explain how these insights should shape future theoretical development. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, developed by Dorobantu et al. 2024, provides valuable guidance for articulating theoretical contributions by emphasizing the importance of clearly specifying how your empirical findings change, understanding of the theoretical puzzle that motivated your research. The Canvas prompts you to consider questions such as, how do the empirical findings change how we think about the puzzle? And what is novel or surprising about your findings? These questions force you to move beyond simple description of findings to meaningful analysis of their theoretical significance. Practical implications address how your findings should inform the decisions and actions of practitioners, managers, policymakers, or other stakeholders. Practical implications demonstrate the real-world value of scholarly research and its potential to improve organizational effectiveness and individual well-being. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, caution against vague implications that could apply to virtually any study, emphasizing the importance of precision and specificity. Effective practical implications are specific, actionable, and clearly connected to your empirical findings. They should avoid vague generalities in favor of concrete recommendations that practitioners can implement. The implications should also acknowledge the boundary conditions under which your recommendations are most likely to be effective. The implications section should also address how your findings inform policy decisions or broader societal issues when relevant. This demonstrates the broader significance of your research and its potential to contribute to important social and economic outcomes. The key is to ensure that all implications flow logically from your empirical findings and are presented with appropriate caveats about their scope and applicability. Limitations and future research. The limitations and future research section represents a critical component of the discussion that demonstrates scholarly maturity, methodological sophistication, and strategic thinking about the advancement of knowledge in your field. Rather than serving as an apologetic acknowledgement of weaknesses, this section should be framed as a thoughtful analysis of the boundary conditions of your findings and a compelling agenda for future theoretical and empirical development. Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024, emphasized that limitations should be addressed honestly without undermining the study's contribution. The key is to acknowledge constraints on your research while demonstrating how these constraints create opportunities for future investigation that can build upon and extend your contributions. This approach transforms potential criticisms into a roadmap for theoretical advancement and empirical progress. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, developed by Dorobantu et al., 2024, provides guidance for this process through its emphasis on boundary conditions and limitations as integral components of a complete research narrative. Methodological limitations should be addressed with specificity and theoretical grounding. Rather than providing generic statements about sample size or generalizability, you should identify specific methodological constraints that may influence the interpretation of your findings and explain how these constraints relate to broader methodological challenges in your field. Theoretical limitations address constraints in your theoretical framework that may limit the scope or generalizability of your findings. This discussion should identify specific theoretical mechanisms or boundary conditions that were not adequately addressed in your current investigation, and explain how future research could extend theoretical understanding. Future research directions should be specific, theoretically grounded, and clearly connected to the limitations and contributions of your current study. Rather than providing generic calls for more research, you should propose specific research questions, methodological approaches, and theoretical extensions that can advance understanding of the phenomena you have studied. Gillicanek and Tepper, 2012, emphasized that this forward-looking orientation is essential for positioning your research as a new beginning for future inquiry. The limitations and future research section should conclude with a statement that reinforces the significance of your contributions while acknowledging the ongoing nature of scholarly inquiry. This demonstrates intellectual humility while maintaining confidence in the value of your research. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, a tool for discussion coherence. The AMJ Management Research Canvas, developed by Dorobantu et al., 2024, provides a comprehensive framework for ensuring the coherence and completeness of your research narrative, with particular relevance for structuring effective discussion sections. This canvas represents a significant methodological advancement that addresses a common problem in empirical research: the lack of integration between different components of the research process. The canvas is particularly valuable for discussion sections because it provides systematic guidance for articulating contributions and boundary conditions while maintaining coherence with your overall research narrative. The canvas consists of 9 interconnected elements that must work together to address a central theoretical puzzle. 1. The puzzle. 2. Audience and prior research. 3. Research question. 4. Theoretical constructs and relationships. 5. Research setting. 6. Research design and analysis. 7. Empirical findings. 8. Contributions. And 9. Boundary conditions and limitations. For the discussion section, the most critical elements are contributions and boundary conditions and limitations, though all elements must be considered to ensure narrative coherence. The contributions element provides structured guidance for articulating the theoretical and practical significance of your research. The Canvas prompts you to address specific questions that are essential for effective discussion sections. How do the empirical findings change how we think about the puzzle? What is novel or surprising about your findings? How does your study inform future research? And what are the practical contributions of your study? These questions force you to move beyond simple description of findings to meaningful analysis of their significance. The Canvas approach to contributions emphasizes the importance of connecting your empirical findings back to the theoretical puzzle that motivated your research. This connection ensures that your discussion maintains focus and coherence rather than meandering through loosely related implications. By systematically addressing how your findings change understanding of your focal puzzle, you can craft discussion sections that make clear and compelling contributions to scholarly knowledge. The boundary conditions and limitations element provides guidance for strategically framing the constraints of your research while proposing directions for future investigation. The Canvas prompts you to consider how broadly applicable are the findings and in what conditions might they not hold. What are the main limitations of your study and how can future research address them? And how can future research extend your study by addressing its boundary conditions and limitations? This systematic approach to limitations transforms what is often treated as a perfunctory acknowledgement of weaknesses into a strategic analysis of the scope and generalizability of your findings. By clearly specifying the boundary conditions under which your findings are most likely to hold, you provide valuable guidance for future research while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of your research domain. The iterative nature of the Canvas also makes it valuable for refining your discussion section through multiple drafts. As you develop your interpretation of findings, comparison with previous studies, and articulation of implications, you can return to the Canvas to ensure that these components remain aligned with your overall research narrative and contribute to addressing your central theoretical puzzle. Deconstructing Excellence, Gillett-Conage and Tepper, 2012 Framework. Gillett-Conage and Tepper's 2012 editorial, publishing in AMJ Part 6, discussing the implications provides foundational guidance for crafting discussion sections that avoid common pitfalls while maximizing theoretical contribution 1. Their framework is particularly valuable because it is based on extensive editorial experience with both successful and unsuccessful manuscripts, providing insights into the specific characteristics that distinguish exceptional discussion sections from mediocre ones. Understanding and applying their framework is essential for crafting discussion sections that meet the standards of top-tier journals. The ending and beginning paradox represents the central insight of their framework. Gillett-Conage and Tepper argue that effective discussion sections must simultaneously provide closure to the current investigation while opening new avenues for future inquiry. This paradoxical nature requires sophisticated balancing of definitiveness and humility, confidence, and curiosity. You must be sufficiently confident in your findings to make clear theoretical claims while remaining sufficiently humble to acknowledge limitations and propose future research directions. The ending aspect of the discussion requires you to provide clear answers to the research questions that motivated your investigation. This involves synthesizing your empirical findings into a coherent narrative that demonstrates how your research has advanced understanding of your focal phenomena. You must show how your findings resolve theoretical tensions, fill important gaps in knowledge, or challenge existing assumptions in your field. The beginning aspect requires you to identify new theoretical questions, methodological challenges, or practical applications that emerge from your research. This forward-looking orientation positions your research as part of an ongoing scholarly conversation rather than a definitive final word. It demonstrates your understanding that knowledge development is cumulative and collaborative, requiring multiple studies and diverse perspectives to address complex theoretical puzzles. 3 critical pitfalls to avoid. Rehashing occurs when authors simply restate their empirical findings in different language without providing meaningful interpretation or theoretical insight. Beugelsdijk and Tepper note that this is perhaps the most common weakness in discussion sections, reflecting authors' failure to move beyond description to explanation. Effective discussion sections must translate empirical findings into theoretical insights that advance understanding of the phenomena under investigation. Meandering occurs when authors discuss numerous theoretical implications without clear focus or prioritization. This approach dilutes the impact of the discussion and leaves readers uncertain about the study's primary contributions. Beugelsdijk and Tepper recommend focusing on a small number of important theoretical implications and exploring them in depth rather than superficially addressing many different issues. Overreaching involves making theoretical claims that extend beyond what the empirical findings can reasonably support. While authors should be confident in articulating their contributions, they must ensure that their claims are appropriately hedged and well supported by their data. Overreaching undermines credibility and can lead to rejection by reviewers who perceive the claims as unsupported. Best practices for implementation. To implement Beugelsdijk and Tepper's framework effectively, you should begin your discussion by clearly restating the theoretical motivation for your research and the specific questions you sought to address. This provides a foundation for demonstrating how your findings contribute to resolving these questions. You should then systematically address your most important findings, explaining their theoretical significance and practical implications. Finally, you should identify the most promising directions for future research that emerge from your contributions and limitations. The key is to maintain focus throughout your discussion, avoiding the temptation to address every possible implication of your research. Instead, concentrate on the theoretical insights that are most strongly supported by your data and most likely to influence future thinking in your field. Deconstructing Excellence, Beugelsdijk and Bird, 2024. Framework. Beugelsdijk and Bird's 2024 editorial, How to Avoid a Desk, Reject Do's and Don'ts provides crucial insights for crafting discussion sections that meet the standards of top-tier journals. Their framework is particularly valuable because it addresses the most common reasons why manuscripts are rejected at the initial editorial review stage, before they even reach peer reviewers. Understanding these criteria is essential for ensuring that your discussion section contributes to, rather than detracts from, the overall quality of your manuscript. The storytelling imperative represents a central theme in Beugelsdijk and Bird's framework. They argue that effective academic writing must tell a compelling story that is both believable and memorable. The discussion section is where the narrative threads established in your introduction and literature review are woven together into a coherent and impactful conclusion. Effective storytelling in academic writing requires several key elements. First, your discussion must maintain narrative coherence with the story established in your introduction and literature review. The theoretical puzzle you identified at the beginning of your paper should be clearly resolved or advanced by your empirical findings. Second, your discussion should focus on the core concepts and key takeaways rather than attempting to address every possible implication of your research. Third, your discussion should avoid harking, hypothesizing after results are known, which undermines the credibility of your theoretical framework. Precision in language and argumentation represents another critical element of Beugelsdijk and Bird's framework. They emphasize the importance of avoiding vague language and meaningless jargon that obscures rather than clarifies your contributions. Discussion sections should use precise, unambiguous terminology that clearly communicates the significance of your findings. Theory and method-related rigor requires clear distinction between theoretical development and literature review. precise theoretical argumentation, and honest acknowledgement of limitations without undermining contributions. Beugelsdijk and Bird note that many manuscripts fail because authors confuse literature review with theory development, leading to discussions that lack theoretical precision and focus. Effective theoretical development in the discussion section requires you to clearly specify the theoretical mechanisms that account for your findings and to explain how these mechanisms advance understanding beyond what was previously known. You should avoid broad conceptual discussions in favor of precise theoretical arguments that are directly supported by your empirical findings. Avoiding common mistakes. Beugelsdijk and Bird identify several common mistakes that lead to desk rejection. Overcomplicating the story occurs when authors attempt to integrate too many theoretical perspectives or address too many research questions, leading to confusion and lack of focus. Poor focus results from failure to maintain a clear narrative thread throughout the manuscript. Inadequate theoretical grounding occurs when authors fail to develop precise theoretical arguments or confuse literature review with theory development. To avoid these mistakes, you should ensure that your discussion maintains clear focus on your central theoretical puzzle and primary contributions. You should resist the temptation to address every possible implication of your research, instead concentrating on the most important theoretical and practical insights that emerge from your findings. Practical application and common pitfalls. Synthesize framework. Drawing upon the collective wisdom of our 3 foundational articles, we can develop a comprehensive framework for crafting discussion sections that avoid common pitfalls while maximizing theoretical and practical impact. Pre-writing phase. Before beginning your discussion section, use the AMJ Management Research Canvas to map out your key contributions and their relationships to your theoretical puzzle. Identify the 2 to 3 most important theoretical implications of your findings and develop clear arguments for how these implications advance understanding in your field. This preparation will help you avoid the meandering. Writing phase. Structure your discussion to follow the 4 core functions: interpretation, contextualization, implication, extension, while maintaining narrative coherence with your introduction and literature review. Use precise language and avoid vague generalities. Ensure that each paragraph advances your theoretical argument rather than simply describing findings. Revision phase. Review your discussion against the common pitfalls identified in our framework. Check for rehashing, meandering, overreaching, and vague implications. Ensure that your limitations are framed strategically and that your future research directions are specific and theoretically grounded. Quality assurance checklist. Does your discussion clearly resolve the theoretical puzzle established in your introduction? Have you avoided simply restating results and instead provide meaningful interpretation? Are your theoretical implications specific and well supported by your findings? Do your practical implications provide actionable guidance for practitioners? Are your limitations framed as opportunities for future research? Does your discussion maintain narrative coherence throughout? Have you used precise language and avoided vague generalities? Have you addressed the key elements of the AMJ Management Research Canvas? Advanced strategies for excellence, theoretical innovation. Look for opportunities to propose new theoretical mechanisms, boundary conditions, or frameworks that emerge from your findings. The most impactful discussion sections don't just confirm existing theory, they advance theoretical understanding in meaningful ways. Methodological contribution. Consider how your research approach, measurement strategies, or analytical techniques contribute to methodological advancement in your field. Discuss how future research can build upon your methodological innovations. Integration across levels. Explore how your findings connect different levels of analysis, individual, team, organizational, or different theoretical domains. This can provide opportunities for theoretical integration that enhance the impact of your research. Conclusion and key takeaways. We have undertaken a comprehensive examination of the discussion section, exploring its role as the primary mechanism through which empirical findings are transformed into lasting scholarly contributions. This transformation is neither automatic nor trivial. It requires sophisticated analytical thinking, deep theoretical grounding, and masterful communication skills that distinguish exceptional scholars from competent researchers. The frameworks and principles we have explored provide a roadmap for developing these essential capabilities. Fundamental principles for excellence. The discussion section serves 4 interconnected functions that collectively determine the impact and influence of your research. Interpretation requires you to translate empirical findings into meaningful theoretical insights that advance understanding of the phenomena you have studied. Contextualization demands sophisticated synthesis that positions your findings within the broader landscape of existing knowledge while identifying areas of convergence and divergence. Implication involves articulating the theoretical and practical significance of your research in ways that influence future thinking and practice. Extension requires strategic framing of limitations and future research directions that transform potential weaknesses into opportunities for theoretical advancement. These functions are not independent or sequential. They are interconnected and mutually reinforcing elements of a coherent narrative that demonstrates the significance of your research. Mastering these functions requires understanding their relationships and learning to weave them together in ways that create compelling and impactful scholarly communication. Commitment to ongoing excellence. Mastering the discussion section is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing process of skill development and refinement. Each research project provides opportunities to apply and extend your understanding of effective scholarly communication. You should approach each discussion section as an opportunity to advance not only knowledge in your field, but also your own capabilities as a scholar and communicator. As you continue your journey as scholar practitioners, remember that the discussion section is where your voice as a scholar emerges most clearly. It is where you demonstrate not only what you have discovered, but why it matters for the broader scholarly conversation and how it should influence future thinking and practice. By mastering this critical skill, you position yourself to make lasting contributions to knowledge that will influence how scholars and practitioners think about important organizational phenomena for years to come. References